a quick aside before I start. I am recording this outside, obviously, so if you hear cars going by, sorry, but I did kind of just want to record this on the fly because, some developments have come up. Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6, or what I'm just going to call it, the Sony Xperia 5 Plus Mark 6. That might be a hot take, I don't know, but man, they really did just conform, didn't they? They really did just conform. Oh. After I gave my friend my 1 Mark 3 because he needed a new phone. He needed a phone that wasn't completely, totaled. Well, not completely totaled, but the screen wasn't fucked up. He gave me his OnePlus 9 Pro, which is the phone in question, right? You guys see that bumblebee right there? Like right there? You see that? I am recording this on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra. I don't know why I couldn't think. Multiple things on my mind right now. But yeah. Let me let these people walk by here real quick. Okay, so let's continue. Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6. As you guys know, I had the 1 Mark 3 since it came out, through the 1 Mark 4 and the 1 Mark 5, right? I honestly just felt like the 1 Mark 3 was still a really good phone. And it still is, in my opinion. Obviously, you have to deal with the Snapdragon 888 and its heating issues. Sony, for the longest time, didn't put a vapor chamber in their phone. So, obviously, the phones would get hot, especially 1 Mark 3 and 1 Mark 4, where they have the 888 or the 8 Gen 1. So those chips were just obviously hot because they were manufactured by Samsung. So, do what you will with that, right? The 1 Mark 5 you guys probably remember, I was this close. Damn it, man, that focusing. I'm sorry, aside. I was this close to getting the 1 Mark 5. But then, what phone came up? The Xiaomi 13 Ultra. And I saw it on Amazon. I gritted my teeth. I said, sorry, Sony. And then I went to the 13 Ultra. And I've not regretted that purchase ever since. So that's not really a bad thing. Sure, I lose things like SD card support. I lose things like the headphone jack, 4K 120 recording, all that stuff. But what I gain is more. Larger camera sensors all the way around. Like not even just counting the main sensor, which is obviously dramatically larger than what you get on the 1 Mark 3 and 1 Mark 5 and 1 Mark 6. But the companion sensors, the Sony IMX858, I think they are, which I believe were the main sensors in the OnePlus 9 Pro, or it was no, because the main sensor was a 48 megapixel sensor. I think it was the ultra wide, because these are 50 megapixel sensors, and they soak up more light, so they're good in low light, whereas Sony phones historically are not great in that, especially if you're going to talk about the telephoto sensor, which we'll get to in a minute on the 1 Mark 6. But yeah, the 13 Ultra all around was not a regrettable purchase. I do wish it had a headphone jack. I do wish it had SD card support, but it also has an IR blaster, so that's actually pretty nice too. And the battery life's phenomenal, 90-watt charging, and we'll get to the charging speeds on that 5 Plus Mark 6 here real quick. I know I'm being a little snarky. You guys haven't really saw this side of me in a while, but this is disappointing to me, and we'll get into why. The 1 Mark 6, for pretty much since like the last few months of the year last year was rumored. It was rumored for so long to have a 19.5 by 9 display. It was unclear whether or not it would go to 1440p or 1080p for the panel, but it would at least be LTPO. And a lot of people complained about Sony not having an LTPO panel, and obviously the screen brightness on the Xperia 1 because of the 4K display. We'll also get to that in a minute, because there's a little bit of a rant there to go on. But it's been rumored for so long. The expectation from a lot of Sony fans is that just was not going to be the case, because if you remember, the 1 Mark IV was rumored to not have the headphone jack anymore. It was supposed to have a 48 megapixel sensor, which ended up being what the 1 Mark V ended up having, was that technically 52 megapixel sensor, but it only uses 48 megapixels of it. But which is the same sensor that the 1 Mark VI uses, the main sensor. And overall, it just became this like song and dance of hoping that wouldn't be the case. And then more closing into 2024 and going in to these last few weeks, and I'd say in like March, then we started getting a little bit more, okay, it may not be coming to America, which obviously it's not. They may be streamlining the camera app, which they did, or the camera apps, which they did, and it would overall be a more mainstream Xperia 1. And that's what a lot of Sony fans didn't want. Especially when you go down to a 1080p 120 hertz display. And keep the price of the phone at $1,400. Like, really, Sony? Really? I'm sorry, but a 1080p 120 hertz LTPO panel should not constitute I'm trying not to swear. Should not constitute your phone to still be $1,400. That just doesn't make any sense. I'm not one of these people to sit here and play your price doesn't make sense game. But the price really doesn't make sense. It's nice that it has a vapor chamber. It's nice that the telephoto zooms even farther optically, but it's still the same size as last year's and the year before that and it's still a smaller sensor. So you're not really going to get a sensor that's useful outside of, what you guys see here, this broad daylight, and it actually decided to brighten up a little bit, which is crazy. It's been like a little gloomy all day until I get off work, which is very funny. But it's obviously it has a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, but to me the 8 Gen 2 is so damn good that the 8 Gen 3 is not even a value proposition to me. It really isn't. I don't care if it could do AI processing faster. I don't care about all the stuff that they say it does dramatically faster, but it really doesn't, because nobody is going to utilize the stuff that you put into the damn chipset to make it go any faster, so it doesn't matter. But in terms of what the Xperia 1 represented to me, it represented a phone that just didn't give a fuck. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna stop. I'm gonna continue to swear, because this is just, it just didn't give a fuck. You get an Xperia 1, You play by you utilize the phone in the way Sony thinks a phone should be used, right? It was very stark, it was very utilitarian, it was a tool. And that goes to show with each iteration up to the 1 Mark V, how they would improve things like, okay, here's Video Pro. You want the Cinema Pro, but you want to have more more in-app control while you're recording the video. Here you go. Things like that. And what perplexes me is that they made all those developments. They made all of those developments just with the 1 Mark VI to say, you know what, fuck it, we're scrapping it. We're gonna give you the carousel that every other fucking smartphone camera does now, because that's how a camera should be. You pitch the Xperia camera as a mini alpha camera, right? And then you just make it look like every other phone now. And then they're launching the phone. The phone doesn't even have a fucking pro video mode. They say, oh, it's gonna be in development. You know what you should have done? Improved on what you had. If you were gonna consolidate, right? Okay, consolidate Video and Cinema Pro. Do that. But you could have kept both apps operability and they look the same. You could have done all of this other stuff. And I know it's moot to bring this up now because it's already done. But there's just something very odd about giving your fan base what they like, but because you're not making enough money, you change it. I give LG one thing. They didn't change how any of their phones operated over time, right? They didn't sit there and make while LG's, camera output can be a little bit punchy at times, it's not nearly as fucking overbearing as Samsung was, especially at the time of the V60, right? And what I liked about Sony is that you get what you get out of the camera. You get ridiculous speed when it comes to how fast a photo is taken. It's in focus, it looks good, and you can edit it after the fact, especially with RAW. And now they're giving you stuff like, okay, you can shoot in a full 48 megapixel mode now. Oh, but there's no RAW capture in the Jesus Christ, in the full 48 megapixel mode. And it's like, why? You gave people a tool with the 1 Mark V that they love, right? And then you just make it a regular phone. It's no longer unique. Why would I spend $1,400 on a 1 Mark VI that has a 1080p display, 19.5 by 9 like every other phone, most phones on the market, when I can get a Xiaomi 14 Ultra with a 1-inch type sensor made by Sony, with an 8-stop variable aperture and 3 other companion sensors that are larger than all of your companion sensors. And sure, they all don't shoot in 4K 120, but guess what? That 1-inch type sensor does. And I'm fine with that. I am okay with that. Like, you're not giving me a reason. Like, if you're just doing this to compete with Samsung and Apple, I don't even think you have an argument there. Because, okay, I guess the fucking telephoto sensor on your phone is slightly larger than the telephoto sensor on the 15 Pro Max, right? In terms of, its in terms of its size, not its megapixel count. But then you go to the S24 Ultra, and quite frankly, I the S24 Ultra's telephoto sensor is larger, so it could actually be utilized at night, and it has more megapixels, so you can shoot a full 50 megapixel still and have things still look good and not look like trash when you zoom in, right? And try to crop and get a better looking image out of it, right? To like what I really want to get is why, if you were going to consolidate, if you were going to streamline, why did you take away the stuff people loved about your shit? Why? That just doesn't make any sense to me. That doesn't make sense. You take away the 4K display, and okay, look, you can say, oh, it didn't get as bright, but from what I've heard from people, the One Mark V's display was usable, at the very least, in bright sunlight. Was it as bright as others? No, it was at least a generation behind. But that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make for the only phone that has a goddamn 4K display on the market. Now you got to go to a One Mark V if you want that. Which isn't bad. It isn't like the One Mark V is a bad phone. It's not. But then you go to 19.5:9, and then in your video app you don't have 21:9 recording, even though you've been pushing that for the past fucking 5 generations of phones. And then your Xperia 10 still has 21:9. So what is your deal, Sony? What? Now it's nice to have a vapor chamber in their phone for better cooling. It's nice to have that alongside things like HS power control. I really do appreciate that. I think that's a very nice addition. Them improving the headphone jack is also nice. I really do think it's not loud. Obviously, we got to see what it's like first, but I don't necessarily hear what it's like first. And I highly doubt it's going to let me use my Sennheiser HD 650s without an external DAC, because it's not an LG phone. It's not a V60. It's not a G8. It's not going all the way back to the LG V20, going up to the V60. So we won't get anything like that, but at least it still has a headphone jack. Still has expandable storage, which is nice. But you pull out of the US market, which, to be fair, I don't think they were making that much money here anyway, so it's fine. But then apparently you're not really selling in China either, which is one of their largest markets, and I don't get that at all, if that's true. You're selling in Europe, and Europe has very stiff competition for you because they have Xiaomi, they have Vivo, and to me, I would much rather go with a Vivo X100 Pro or even a regular Xiaomi 14 than I would go with a One Mark 6. If I'm going to be completely honest, both of them have dramatically faster charging, wired and wireless. Let's break this down for a minute. So the Xperia One Mark 6 still has 30-watt charging. You get a Xiaomi 14 Ultra that has 90-watt charging. That's 3 times faster. Wired charging. But here's the kicker, though. Here's the kicker. You know what else? The 14 Ultra has 80-watt wireless charging, which is 8 times faster. than your 11-watt wireless charging. You may as well, like, to me, if you're just going to have 11-watt wireless, don't fucking have it. And I'm serious. Because there's no point. At that point, you're just doing it because people keep begging for it. If you're not going to up the speed on your charging at all, don't call it fast charging. I'm to the point where I just feel 30-watt charging is basic charging now. I think just charging a phone in an hour and a half is basic charging now. And that's not just a Sony problem. That's a Samsung problem. That's a Google. Google arguably is worse because the lower you go on their you know, on their phone pole, the lower the charging speed is. The Pixel 8a has 18 watt. The Pixel 8 has 27, which I don't get. You should just go up to 30 watts with it because the Pixel 8 Pro has 30 watts. And let's not even talk about the fact that the phone doesn't even always fully charge at the purported speed that they say it supports, because it's adaptive, right? Which is fine because obviously that's good for your battery. But it almost never hits its max charge speed. So what I'm really trying to understand, apparently it's not like the battery life is dramatically better, which I think is good. But honestly, battery life for me on the One Mark III, well, it was still a day-by-day phone. 3 years later, it was still a day-by-day phone. And they said that battery would only last to like maximum capacity for like 2 years. It was still a day-by-day phone up until I got my 13 Ultra. And to me, that's good enough. Now the 13 Ultra is like a day plus. but then I'm also doing a whole bunch of other stuff with this phone. But yeah, the main sensor, I wanted to test it at first, and I would have said I would just get a One Mark V and test it, but then the One Mark V is not going to get the ability to. It's not going to get the ability to do full 48 megapixel stills. So it's not really something I care for that much. Because Sony doesn't update their phones that way. They just update them to the newest version. They don't update them to give them features that the newer phone has that they can easily port over. And then the One Mark VI only has 3 years of OS updates, 4 years of security updates, which for a lot of people sucks, especially in the age of a Google Pixel 8a getting 7 full years of software support and security update support. So to me, it's very laughable that a phone that's like almost 1/3 of the price of your phone, depending on the storage that you get, gets more software support than yours. But you know, that's just Sony, right? Sony in all sectors is just like, I don't know what's going on. Xperia was really the only thing that was like, yes, Sony PlayStation I don't care about anymore. Sony movies I don't really care about anymore. But Xperia is still nice. And now Xperia is just not that for me, and it sucks. So I didn't really want to make this a 25-minute video, but you know, that just ends up being what happens, right? Let me know in the comment section below if you're going to get it. I don't think that's really going to be a point of, I don't think that's something you can really question at this point with how much I kind of railed on it. But it's not even an upgrade, really. Sure you get a newer chipset. Sure you get a better panel in certain now I'm stuttering in a couple of aspects. But to me, it's not what an Xperia is. It's not what an Xperia 1 is. And that's just sad. And this really feels like the last few moments of LG to me. It really does. But at least the V60, even though I went to a 1080p panel, it made sure every other aspect of the phone wasn't compromised. Sure, they did things like no longer have Meridian tuning or didn't use DTS:X 3D surround. They used their own tuning and their own 3D sound engine and stuff like that. But everything else, it still felt like a V series phone. The One Mark 6 doesn't feel like an Xperia 1. It feels like what I've been calling it, an Xperia 5 Plus. It feels like they took an Xperia 5, were like, you know what? Let's make it slightly larger so it completely defeats the purpose. Of being called an Xperia 5. Oh, we'll just call it a 1 instead. And then it gives you the things that the masses want instead of what you wanted. Instead of what you liked about the company that you spent all this money on, right? This brand, right? That's all I got to say, though. Let me know in the comments what you feel. This is Sparta. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the support. Hope you have a wonderful Sunday, whatever time of day it is in your area. Have a good one.